Welcome to our presentation on going beyond the rational, or how visceral methods can enhance research outcomes. In the next 15 minutes, Robert Hafner, Felix Dorn and Anna-Maria Brunner, all geographers from the University of Innsbruck, and me, Christina Planck, I'm a political scientist working at the University of Natural Resources and Life Sciences in Vienna. We will give you some insights on viscerality and how we use it in the context of political ecology and food research. We will first share some thoughts on the political ecology of food. We will explain how this is embedded in our common project on food alternatives, and we will dedicate then most of our time to the topic of viscerality. We will explain some main characteristics of visceral methods, and we will provide you with empirical examples from Argentina before we conclude.
As we all know, the ecological crisis also involves the agricultural sector. From the 1980s onwards, critical scholars have studied the relation between capitalism, agriculture, and the diverse dimensions of ecological crisis, for example, climate crisis, biodiversity loss, deforestation, or water pollution, under the umbrella of political ecology, identifying social relations and questions of power as the principal causes of ecological degradation. This is in stark contrast to approaches such as the planetary boundaries or the Anthropocene that can conceptualize the crisis dimensions independently of social relations. Over the past years, we've seen a growing academic engagement with the contradictions between ecology and capitalist agriculture, referring to the capitalist appropriation of nature in the agricultural sector. Although capitalism is highly dependent on nature, it frames environmental problems as externalities. This means that capitalist production, including capitalist industrial agriculture, constantly undermines the social-ecological conditions on which it depends. With the focus on power relations and the structural dimensions of power, it becomes evident that ecological and social problem constellations are inseparable. We therefore have to shift our focus to social-ecological alternatives.
In our project, our theoretical starting point is the food regime theory. The food regime theory is a prominent theoretical approach to analyze the global development of the agricultural and the food system. It focuses on the political economy and on geopolitics of our society. The current food regime we live in is dominated by transnational corporations and international institutions such as the World Trade Organization. There exists a lively debate in social sciences how the current food regime can be transformed, and we connect to these debates in current political science, sociology, and geography to analyze changes in the current food regime by focusing on local and national initiatives. What we do is that we examine community-supported agriculture and other regional food chains in the Czech Republic, in Switzerland, and in Argentina. Those are examples for what we call values-based modes of production and consumption, and we call them values-based because these initiatives aim for other than economic values such as solidarity and trust.
These values are usually normative and highly context and experience dependent. Considering concrete examples such as the smell of crops, the soil structure, or even forms of solidarity economy, becomes evident that these values are also very often more than rational. And this leads us to the need for an additional framing to include these more than rational elements, and that is viscerality.
We're in a highly volatile field of the modern rational based on individual and group experiences. So one way to conceptualize viscerality is by looking at the body, as is shown here in the yellow rectangle labeled intracorporeal viscerality. So first of all, the body gets a certain type of impact. Be the sound, some music, touched by people we like, by the smell and taste of food we adore. So this impact can trigger certain feelings that are materialized through the blushing of one's cheeks or elevated heart rates, which we could measure. So this is one way of entering or making visible the more than rational elements here. And adding a social cultural context to those feelings. We talk about emotions. That means the feelings that are interpreted through our learned experiences and collective interpretations. So feelings and emotions are then in turn expressed and articulated both verbally and non-verbally, as we see in the concrete examples later on. And finally, those expressions, articulations, they continue to shape the social cultural context and can act as a further impact on one's own or another person's body, thus recycling their intercorporeal viscerality. So this is quite an abstract schematic of how intracorporeal viscerality works. But how does this abstract scheme actually translates to in concrete empirical research? That's what we will see in the next slides. So we will present two examples from this year's project fieldwork in Argentina that we call first Star-alongs and second NetMap Plus.
I will start off with the alongs, which can have various forms spanning from work, play, dance to walk, cook and eat alongs. And these are options for the researcher to engage actively with the people and the field, allowing some kind of co-experiencing. I will exemplarily pick out the cook, eat and walk alongs by presenting some examples of my fieldwork undertaken this year in March in Argentina at CSA initiatives. So all of these forms of alongs encompass the verbal and the nonverbal sphere as a means of interaction and sources of information. And this picture you can see here shows a cooking session done together with a farmer at the respective farm. And this collective activity allowed to engage differently with the farm's products and created multisensory co-experiences. So in this case, for example, one could see the product and the cooking place and the ways of food processing, hears talks and sizzling, frizzling cooking noises, and smell, for example, of smoke and fresh air. And these multi-layered experiences with all the senses might trigger emotions or the process of storytelling and consequently allow gaining a deeper insight into the research field. Such experiences can then be complemented and documented by a combination of autoethnography and thick description, adding some contextual, relational, and interactional information, and additionally, video and audio recordings can serve as supplementary data for subsequent co-interpretation, meaning a shared discovery of data in order to get to the why behind. Now moving on to the second type of alongs that I want to present, the walk-alongs. So these served me to gain further insights into how, in this case, the farmers' bodies relate to the farm, or more generally speaking, insights into embodied connections and experiences, as well as feelings, for example, in regard to the natural environment. And I initiated these walk-alongs by asking the farmers to show me those spots on the farm that are of specific importance to them. This means that I emphasized that it was not necessary to give me a general farm tour or an overview of the whole farm and the related hard facts, but that I was rather interested in their personal point of view. So these tours should mirror the farmer's personal relation to the space and be guided by affect and emotions. As examples of the farm tour, I brought you a picture and a short video, and the first picture here shows the farmer touching and smelling the soil of the compost. And at this moment of multisensory engagement with the soil, the farmer stated that the soil is black gold and the heart of the farm. This is interesting because the farmer used the metaphor of the central organ of the body to describe the soil as a core constituent of the farm, while at the same time bodily interacting with it. The second example, this short video, shows how the farmer passes a leaf to a second farmer and me, inviting us to feel and taste it. And this shows very nicely how walk-alongs invite to sharing multi-sensory experiences. This invitation to experience the same allows a better understanding of the other's feelings and bodily experiences. Thus, it allows, more generally speaking, to understand or get a feeling of the visceral realm of farming at a CSA initiative, as it was in this case. As a second example, I now want to present the method of net mapping, which is a tool to map actor networks in which, for example, a farm is embedded in, and done in order to gain a better understanding and overview of the actors perceived as influential and important. And this process is always guided by 4 principal questions, which are asked in the following order. Who is involved? How are the actors linked? How influential are they? And what are their goals? And this rather classical method can be complemented by including the visceral sphere in several ways. For example, by noting and writing down multisensory cues, meaning when and in which context are the senses mentioned, by observing the body language, the facial expressions, and the sounds of the interviewee, and also by conducting ex post discussions of the results, inviting the interviewee to engage further with the emotional.
So let us attempt a conclusion here. As we have stated in the beginning, working with the visceral is challenging, particularly since we are dealing with modern rational elements that are really hard to grasp. But what we can say from the empirical examples is that we have always some impact on the body, for example, through the 5 senses. What is going on within the body is hard to grasp, but we can check in at the level of expression and articulation, be it classically through verbalization of feelings and emotions, or as shown before, non-verbally through drawings, body language, movement, etc. And those expressions do make a difference in the atmosphere of modern human interactions. So identifying and subsequently interpreting those elements open up the potential to deeper understand why people collaborate or not, foster solve conflicts, which ultimately creates new impact on their and other bodies.
Viscerality is, therefore, fruitful for better contextualization of modern rational understandings. Viscerality is, second, an add-on to classic methods to make the emotional more explicit. But viscerality, third, also needs the predisposition of all involved parties to not just simply repeat classic ways of doing research.
So with this small glimpse in our project, foodalternatives.at, and our empirical research, we really hope that we have started a conversation on how to include modern rational ways of doing research. And now we're looking forward to further in-depth discussions and exchange. Thank you very much.